is Shari Davis from Participatory Budgeting Project. She will talk about participatory budgeting with young people in Boston. Welcome up.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. And Malin, you're really mean because it's hard to follow something like that, right? And I want to get to the Q&A so bad that I'm ready to speed through what I have to say. And let me just start by saying this. You guys just changed my life. And I've been doing youth organizing work and community work since I was 9 years old. And it's rare, thank you so much, it's rare that I meet elected officials that look like me and my family. And so to see a young person up here that's an elected official, a youth mayor, who's, in my opinion, changing history, just literally changed my life. So please make another round of applause for these folks. Thank you guys so much for coming out. And let me try and get my head together so I can talk to you guys about participatory budgeting in Boston. And as I do that, one of the biggest things I want to say, and working at the Participatory Budgeting Project, which is a nonprofit organization, I need to acknowledge one thing in complete transparency. I am a recovering government employee. I worked in local government for 15 years, and huge shout out to the folks that are in the room that work in government. It is hard, and it is challenging, and it is also a beautiful and amazing opportunity to really make some change. And it doesn't always feel like that when you walk into the office. But when it comes to government, government is the people that show up. Someone believed in me when I was 14 years old, and I started showing up in government. I used to joke that they couldn't get rid of me, and 15 years later, I had created a division in government, literally changed government. That's why I believe it can happen, because I had a chance to do it. I created a division in government that exists now in the city of Boston, and I no longer work there. That means that this is the way the city of Boston does business. The division I created was the Division of Youth Engagement and Employment, which is a one-stop shop. I hope you guys understand this expression, which is a one-stop shop for young people in the city of Boston. They can go and find out about employment opportunities. They can get resources curated by other young people specifically for them. They can receive professional development training, and they can also get engaged in our civic engagement initiatives in the city of Boston. When I came up in Boston, these were all different things that I had to travel across the city to access. And I realized some of the challenges in getting connected. And part of what I did in government was create a space and an entire team that addressed this. The reason why I got to do a lot of this work, and I had a chance to work for 2 mayors, one for 13 years and the other for 2. And the mayor did a couple things. This is some information about the Participatory Budgeting Project. If you want to take a picture of this, you can, but we'll come back to it, don't worry. But one of the things that the first mayor that I worked with told me when I was about 14 years old was, make sure that when you're doing work, it's not death by photo op. And let me explain to you what that means. As a young person that was really engaged in my community, I started teaching karate when I was 10 years old. I come from a very low-income family, but I traveled all over the country and had an opportunity to go internationally because of martial arts. The mayor told me, make sure that no one takes a picture of you doing something and tells a story about you that's not true. Make sure that when you're talking about community work and a community program or a community project, that someone is not just using your image to say that they did youth engagement and participation. That is something that I've taken with me through my entire career. And I recently turned 30, which I'm coming to terms with. But by international standards, I'm still a young person, so we can keep that in mind. But one of the things that I do in the work that I believe in and the work that I bring, whether it's PB or something else, is this thing. I want to make sure that young people have an opportunity not only to be engaged, but to really stand in their power. And so before I get going, I wanted to introduce you to a couple people. These are my friends, some young folks that work in the city of Boston and do amazing things. All of these folks I got connected to through participatory budgeting. Malachi is one of my idols. He's really kind of one of my mentors. Malachi is in college now, but he started with me a couple years ago. He had never stepped inside of a city-owned building before, and some way, somehow, got to a community meeting about participatory budgeting. A couple years later, Malachi was sitting in the Obama White House, giving the president advice on what young Black and Latino men across the country need. I've never sat down and met President Obama, but Malachi has. And the other young people that I work with, and you can see some of their images here, are providing information and insight on cultural plans that are going to build out the city of Boston, are managing hundreds of thousands of dollars and sitting on construction project boards. These are things that I never had an opportunity to do when I was a young person, but through PB, one of the unexpected outcomes was that these young people now are building a legacy of leadership, and that's just the way the city of Boston does business at this point. And so I'm going to stop talking for just a second because I want you guys to get a sense of what I mean when I talk about youth PB. And I brought a really short video so you can hear from some of the young people that are doing PB in schools and beyond in terms of what their experience is. And then I'll summarize a couple of really quick things for you.
If you live in any community or you go to school at any place, you should be able to have a say in how to spend the money that affects your life.
What are the real needs of the community? If you only have a certain amount of money, what is it that you can do that's going to benefit as many people as possible?
Phoenix Union was the first school-based program to be initiated, and we were wondering how will this work in the school community, and it's worked beautifully.
It empowers the students and it teaches them about the importance of civic engagement in a way that will actually impact them.
We're implementing a project that we call participatory budgeting.
That's done by splitting up and coming up with ideas.
Each grade level had 50 ideas, and then we had to take all 50 ideas from each grade level and then make them smaller.
And then you present those ideas to the students.
And from there, we made proposals, and then now we have people voting on which project they want to see new here.
The students are going to be the ones that are going to be deciding this.
You're going to be able to see a change that the whole school is actually deciding on.
Seeing everybody come together and participate in this one thing that is going to benefit them and our school as a whole was exciting to see.
Participatory budgeting is not only an investment in the school, but it's an investment in our students' critical thinking, communication, problem-solving abilities, and their buy-in and ownership of the school.
If the students as a whole decide on what the school gets to be or what it gets to have, it's much more empowering to the student. It's like they have control over what environment they're raised in.
Sometimes we don't even have a voice, we don't have a say in anything, so this honestly does help.
This is actually my first time that I've ever voted in something.
It makes people want to be better advocates for themselves and not having that hesitancy to say what you want because it's your community.
I ended up voting for the water project.
A garden.
The musical instruments.
The fitness.
The shade.
The art supplies.
The audio and visual one.
Thanks for voting.
Thanks for voting.
We want future Americans to be engaged and make sure that they're able not just to make choices and have opinions, but actually go and do the democracy.
And an informed vote counts for a lot. And I think having an opportunity to start practicing that now in a positive change that you see on campus, it's proof of concept for a lot of people.
It's made me think about being a citizen, and so working with other people and getting their ideas really expands my mindset.
When I get older, I still want to be seeing what's wrong with my community, coming up with ways to fix it, and then acting upon it. That's what I like doing. I just never really gotten the chance to act upon it till now because of PB.
With this experience, I can go much higher, possibly even the government, to do bigger projects that is not just in a school or a community, but possibly the whole city.
And if our job is to create great young men and young women, the PB process In our opinion, it's a no-brainer.
So I was a little bit nervous, not understanding how we would make this work in a school setting, but the guidance that's provided through Participatory Budget Project really made this easy.
PB's process is really important and kind of easy and practical for every high school.
What happens in cities, it happens in districts, it happens in public housing.
Anybody across the country, across the world could probably do PB.
So the reason why I wanted to show you that video was I think it really summarizes our approach not only to school-based participatory budgeting, but really youth-focused participatory budgeting. And so as I dive into a technical challenge here, but as I start to talk about what this looks like, I wanted to make sure that you guys had a picture of what this feels like when young people are engaged. And the PB process in the United States is a bit different, right? There are no two PB processes that look identical. In the United States, never mind comparing PB to other spaces across the world. But when we're talking about youth PB, especially in the city of Boston and other places in the US, something that's so incredibly important is that before we dive into any of these phases of idea creation and proposal development, something happens first. And that is that young people come together and form a steering committee. This steering committee writes the rules that governs the process. And so literally, in the city of Boston, the mayor came to me one day and said, Shari, I heard about this thing called PB. You've made this division. It's working really well. Let me add something else on it. Can you do a PB process with young people? And at the time, I had no idea what participatory budgeting was or how I was going to accomplish this. And he said, great, so you're going to figure it out, and I want young people to directly decide on $1 million of my capital budget. This was a huge undertaking. I was incredibly nervous, but it worked out really well and not only changed my opinion of what youth engagement could look like, but it really gave me examples of how this thing works in ways that drastically change government. The first time I got a chance to see that was when I sat in a room with 16 and 17-year-olds from across the city, and they really started to think about eligibility criteria, our voting and outreach strategy, and they had to make really difficult decisions on who was going to be eligible. They decided that 12 to 25-year-olds that lived in the city of Boston were the only people eligible to vote, but they also made interesting decisions on who could suggest an idea. Anyone from anywhere in the world could suggest an idea to make Boston better. But when it came to maintaining the integrity of the vote, they decided that young people between 12 and 25 that live in the city would be the ones to determine what the allocation of city funds looks like. And so as we move through the PB process that's designed for young people, it begins to look a little bit different because they're the ones that are designing it. And so when we jump into idea collection in other spaces or in other PB processes, we really tailor every phase of PB to the folks that live in community or to the folks that we're really trying to reach. In the city of Boston, the steering committee determined that the goal of the PB process was really going to be to connect young people that hadn't or would not have a connection to civic life otherwise. And so they really developed a strategy that would engage those folks. So when we did idea collection, yes, it was in schools, but it was in transit stops, malls, and wherever they said we had to be with young people. Another huge difference in how we do PB in the US, especially youth PB, is young people form steering or small committees, and they look at all of the projects that came in, hundreds, if not thousands of proposals, and distill them down based on need, feasibility, and impact. They sit alongside city and agency staff to do that, and so city staff are learning what youth spending priorities are. And young people are learning how to navigate government and how to get a project from an idea into complete implementation and community. And the other thing is that young people know how to reach other young people. It's not me. I don't have any secret sauce. I just turn to the young person and say, how do we do this? The best social media manager I ever had in my career in government was 16 years old. When I posted something, there was no response. But when Mabel did it, everyone responded, and I asked her to teach me, and she said, well, I just know how to communicate with my community. And I said, great, let's just have you do that. And that's how we saw amazing success. What you're looking at right now are billboards that showed up on public transit stops and our real kind of grassroots strategy that young people designed and implemented so that we could be at public transit stops and connect with folks. We learned a ton of things. One of the most important is that technology is essential, but it doesn't replace human engagement, and young people are the center of that. I'll stop there because there are a couple things that I know will come up as we go through the Q&A, but thank you guys so much.
So, thank you very much. I just want to say that Boston is one of my favorite international examples when we talk about PB in Sweden, and not because of the youth engagement, but because of the way you're describing the process on your web page and all the films that are made from the examples in Boston. So I just love to talk about it. So that's why we're also really happy that you came here all the way from the States to talk about your experiences.